All right, Pete, it is draft position week here on the Fantasy Life show. Yesterday, Dwayne and I talked about what to do if you are lucky enough to have a spot 101 through 104. And now we're going to keep on moving down with 105 through 108, the mid round draft slot, if you will. So we were talking a little bit before the show. And as much as, I would prefer to have a top four pick if possible, you can argue that some of these middle round spots, man, are almost superior because if we look at it, CMC, Bijan, Brees, and then our top five, arguably top six wide receivers. Obviously CD, Chase, Sun God, Jettas, and then AJ Brown, if you want to throw him in there as well. Who am I forgetting? Tyreek Hill, of course. Anyway, I do think we have a fairly clear 8 or 9 players, and then we start getting into Jahmyr Gibbs, who's banged up. We have Puka Nacua, who's a little bit banged up. Garrett Wilson, maybe we're a little less convinced about him making the leap. It does seem like there's arguably a tier drop-off after that first 8 or 9 guys. So I know you've done literally hundreds. Maybe you even got a 4-digit counter on the best ball drafts at this point. So not the exact same strategy as redraft, obviously, but how have you generally felt, when you are forced to draft out of the middle portions?
Yeah, in general, almost regardless of format, I like drafting in the middle because one, you can kind of read the room and you can anticipate a run. And that's very valuable too. Like if your room has these stretches where they're just chewing up all the running backs and you're like, holy cow, this is the last player in this tier, you kind of can read that and capitalize on it. And when you're picking at the turn, it's also basically impossible to get like 2 picks at value, right? You think, oh, there's this big slider. Maybe he falls to you at the turn. Okay, you scoop him up, but then you just took the faller and have to pick again. And often I find myself feeling like I'm having to reach at the turns just to go get my guy. When you're in the middle of the draft, you can have some of those drafts that line up where you're like, I'm getting my guy, value, 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 value. And it comes together in a really nice way. So I do like picking from the middle of the draft. And I do think the way ADP sets up, and we'll get into it here, I think it's perfect for home leagues to be in the middle of the draft, specifically in the early rounds. I think you can kind of basically control the draft board from that middle position.
A lot of flexibility, and I'm with you where when you are into turns, it's like you start looking at the ADP and there's usually a pretty wide gap if you are trying to, force to reach on someone. So you're less likely to obviously get someone to come all the way back. Middle rounds, usually at the most looking at 11 or 12 picks, difference between when you're actually going from one round to the next. So might be a bit of a trick question here because I know a lot of us fancy the hero RB, zero RB strategies, regardless of where we happen to be starting. But, Dwayne and I were kind of going through some mocks yesterday, and both of us agreed that hero RB starts, when we are able to from early spots or best. Has there been a strategy you've really leaned to in the middle draft spots or just kind of taking it as it goes? Because again, just looking at some of the regular ADP, I do think more of almost a pure zero RB approach makes sense because especially in those first 2 rounds, really have a good chance of getting 2 absolute studs at wide receiver. And then once we get into round 3, especially in home leagues, not so much over in the best ball streets where you can get dope running backs in round 6. But in home leagues, I think once we get to the middle parts of round 3 and 4, I just don't love the running backs that are left. So I do think, again, more times than not, if I am picking 105, 106, yeah, if a Brees Hall falls to me, okay, I'll take him and do a hero RB thing. But if I am taking a Justin Jefferson in round 1, I wouldn't be surprised, man, that I am going, 6, 7 rounds before I take my first running back.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I've been a very big proponent of zero RB over the years, but you have to also be very contextual to what is your scoring settings and what is the ADP, what are your league mates going to do. And I've written a few articles for Fantasy Life this offseason. I looked at the perfect Yahoo draft through 10 rounds, and then I also looked at the best values on all of the major redraft sites, and I used Underdog ADP as a way to help me unearth those because the underdog market is so sharp. And the conclusion I came to for basically whatever redraft site you're playing on, Yahoo, ESPN, Sleeper, and we do have ADP available for all of these sites up on Fantasy Life. This is free. With the premium, you can actually unlock something that shows the differences across those sites, but be sure to check it out if you're curious to kind of see where players might be valued. But what I found is that the wide receivers are massively undervalued on these sites. You can get guys with massive upside like a Xavier Worthy, like a JSN in the double-digit rounds. And so when I'm working through that, I'm like, man, I want to be taking wide receivers later because, like you said, the running backs are gone. You're looking at like Tyrone Tracy in the 12th in a redraft league like that. So my perfect strategy, if it breaks, would be to start running back. So the zero
Wow.
RB bro is advocating for double anchor. But like you said, it sometimes doesn't work out in round one. If CMC, Bijan, and Brees are all off the table, I'm probably going to just take the receiver there. But if you can get one of them and you can come back and you can get a Kyron, you can get an Achane, maybe Gibbs falls because of this lingering injury, I think that is a dominant start to these redraft leagues. And then you can just hammer wide receiver. And Malik Neighbors goes in the sixth. Tank Dell goes in the sixth round.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time pulling the trigger on running backs after round two. So I just want to get them early.
And man, there are some just select rookies that really freaking fall as well. I mean, we're talking about Brian Thomas Jr. having a pick position like in the 140s over on Yahoo.
Nuts.
I think he's going in the same, like, well past Brandon freaking Aubrey. We have people putting kickers ahead of some of these, first round wide receivers, for crying out loud. So it's a great point there, and something that, again, as Dwayne and I were going through the drafts, maybe I myself need to just be a little better at, because there are legit Jackson Smith and Jigba types wide receiver fours that we wouldn't dream of being available this late, actually, available this late. So with that